So our next guest is an attorney and an author, and he has a book that's a mystery, but it's also based on true events, I believe. So we want to welcome James Hammonds, attorney and author, to Black Authors Matter TV.
There we
And
go.
you can unmute your mic.
I don't know why I guess want to sit in the dark tonight.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. We want to be able to see you.
All right, so go ahead and unmute.
Now I've got it.
There we
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
All right. I'm really happy to be here with you during this Black History Month. Black history has always been a very exciting period for me. In fact, right now, what I'm doing is running a series of videos called Black History Moments, and it's running on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all over the place, because I think it's really important for us to reach back and learn from those persons who have been through this before and understand what we have to do. And I think that's really important right now because I see so many people engaged in this individual activity. They think if I do it, that's all that matters. When you have people like Dr. King saying, we will make it to the promised land. Not me, that's not one person, but we will make it. And it involves us working together collaboratively to make things happen. So this is the month, and I'm glad you have this program available to us and to all of us to be able to celebrate who we are and where we are at this moment in history.
Yeah, and we celebrate it every week, 52 weeks out of a year.
That's what's supposed to happen. You're right. Absolutely.
Not just in February. So do you have a copy of your book handy?
My book is right here.
When Shepherds Kill.
Shepherds Kill.
And it's based on true events, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, it's based on the murder of Alderman Benjamin Lewis back in 1964. He was
in Chicago.
Found, yes, in Chicago. Okay. He was found at his desk the next morning after he'd been murdered by his secretary. And this became a big event in Chicago. But in all these years, no one has come forward to say that they committed the crime, nor has there been any conclusion from the police as to who committed the crime. So I thought it was well worth the effort to create a fictional story around this event. And if for no other reason than to have it set out in writing and be there for as long as we can to talk about this particular event. Also, I wanted to look at the fact that there's so many events where African people have been murdered, and very little is done to actually find out who committed the crime. So I've decided that this was going to be the first book in a series of books looking at this issue of individuals being murdered and then finding a solution for the murder in the book, so that we can have some sense that there is a way that you can get some action or in conclusion from these murders that happen outside in the community. So the other aspect of the book, though, which is just as important or even more important to me, is all of the issues that we kind of bring out where we look at what's happening to our community. And I think that right now we don't tend to focus as much on the various calamities that occur to us that cause us to do the things that we have to do. Just like tonight, I was listening to the news, and the young man out in Colorado is being accused of murdering a white male and a white female at a dormitory. And you look at it and you say, oh, just another Black person committing the crime. But it's never just another Black person committing a crime. There's always something in the background, something that has happened that caused that person to crack and to do what he or she is doing. And very often we don't look at that. We don't look behind the scene to find out what motivated that person to commit the crime. And it's usually something in their background. It could be based on the interactions with those white persons that they're interacting with. It could be their black family members who created a problem for them. But there are just so many things that impact us on a daily basis that can cause us to move in the actions of committing crimes against other people and more often against our own people. And we need to look at that more and more these days. So that's what I'm attempting to do with my writing skills, such as they are, and try to
So
look at all of these factors.
are we talking true crime, or are we talking crime fiction?
Well, crime fiction is based on true reality. Okay. That's what I think most writers would say, is that their fiction is based on something that happened in reality. Then they build a story around it, and that makes it something that people are more interested in reading. Because you can hear the news, but it's more exciting to be able to get into the mind of the individual who committed the crime, get into the mind of the persons who are affected by the crimes. And that's what makes the story more interesting to the individual, is that they can follow that from beginning, the middle, and the end in that process.
Okay, do you believe, and we see this and hear this today, and I think there's some validity to it, but I would like to get your take on it. There are some people who are kind of growing up without a conscience. A lot of times they're raising themselves, or they're in unnurturing, that's the word I'll use, environments. And that seems to be something that we're looking at now. We're seeing, for example, with the increase in carjackings, and most of those are being done by young people. Or for even example, the Super Bowl parade shooting that happened a couple of days ago. And they were juveniles. They haven't shown their picture because they're juveniles. Well, I haven't seen them anyway. But apparently it was just an argument, and they weren't thinking it's a crowd of people. If you shoot, you can hit innocent people that had nothing to do with whatever this argument is about. So what do you attribute some of this to?
Well, let me just say, first of all, my primary concern is with African Americans. So I'm going to speak from that vantage point. I think the overall issue is important, but I think also that the rest of our society has enough personnel, specialists looking into those kinds of issues, and they deal with it every day. But in our community, we find that many people do not take the time or create the environment or produce enough monies to look at what is actually happening to our youth. I once had a young person who told me, I was representing them. He said, well, Mr. Hammonds, this is what we do. We get up in the morning, we go scouring through the neighborhood, and we find a house that looks like it needs, that we can burglarize, and we do it. And I said, well, what's going to be our defense then? He said, I don't need a defense because I'm guilty and I'm willing to go to jail and serve my time. Well, that particular young man needed intervention. And to say that the person's family members are not doing what needs to be done, that means the burden should be on all of us to cause that person to be redirected in another way. We have these juvenile court proceedings, and they're supposed to rehabilitate our young people. We have many places like Chicago where you had they pulled back on mental health services for people, and they pulled back on providing additional housing for people. And all of these things that maybe the person is not receiving at home, we as a society need to be able to step up and help them. If they need psychological treatment assistance, we should be giving it to them, and not just, oh, he committed a crime, let him put him in jail, and that's the end of it. We need to go to and find out the root causes of these problems for the individuals who are involved in it, and we can do this. You know, we have the money. The thing that struck me recently is that when we're combated with these immigrant situations, thousands of people have come to Chicago, New York, other places. And all of a sudden, we have millions of dollars that we can allocate to help them. And I'm not opposed to helping other people, but I'm concerned that when we've been in this problem for decades in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and yet when people start talking about we need millions of dollars to help Black people seem to run away from that. And that's not just white politicians, but it's also Black politicians. And we need to make these people more accountable in trying to help our young people to actually do better than what they are. And not just simply saying, well, it's the mother's fault or it's the father's fault. Because even they have problems. The mothers have problems. The fathers have problems. Why are we helping everybody with these problems? We know the history of Black people in America. We know slavery. We know what happened with segregation and all these different negative impacts on the psychology of Black people. We know what happened when they came from the South to the North and all the discrimination that happened across the country. We know all these impacts. We know the impact of drugs coming from Latin America, Mexico, and other places. Why don't we do things to help our people? That is the question I keep raising with all the people that I know who are politicians, specialists. Why don't we help our people? Instead of just declaring, oh, he's a criminal or she's a criminal. That parents didn't do right. Why are we doing better as a community of people? And that's why I said we need to be thinking in terms of we have to get to the promised land, not just one person because they can sing or they can dance or they can play football or basketball. It should be the collective group. And we all should be looking out for one another. And that's how you get to this problem. Other people look out for their people. They bring in the site. If a shooting happens at a school, they have had no problem bringing in whatever resources they need to help those young people. We need those resources every single day, not just when a shooting happens, but every single day. So why aren't these resources being given to us, being provided to us? And we need to make that demand on people that we should get these resources. I'm not apologizing for needing resources. I'm not going to be apologizing because things happen to Black people, because I know why they happen. And we need to stop being, wishy-washy about it. We need to demand what ought to be ours. And so in my book, that's part of what I'm trying to make certain that people come to grips with, is that it's not just the matter that Tom or Sam is a bad person. Look at all the things that happened to Sam. And it didn't start yesterday. It's been that way for decades.
Well, you said a mouthful. It's been my observation that unfortunately we always get stepped on in terms of the resources, because there's always a new victim or a new group that ends up moving to the front of the line or moving ahead of us. So this is the politicians are the ones who make the decisions about finances. They fund what they want to fund. They find the money for things that they feel are priorities.
It's
And
also about lobbyists, though,
it
because
is.
if I'm being persecuted and I'm not demanding that I'm treated better, and nobody is standing up for me to say I should be treated better, people are going to think that I'm satisfied with the way I'm being treated. But when somebody else is persecuted and that person feels that they have the power to stand up and say, you're going to treat me better. And then not only do they feel they have that power, they're even more empowered when other people are standing up with them. Then they're going to get change. So what say that to say is this is what we see all the time in lower income neighborhoods. Often you'll see them with the streets that aren't very good. The holes, the potholes in the streets, the cracks in the streets, and so forth. but nobody is making noise to say, fix our streets. So nobody thinks about those. But if those same potholes were in a better neighborhood where the people feel a little bit more empowered to say, fix my streets, those streets are going to be fixed because that other neighborhood is making noise. So
see, a lot of times too, if it's a lower income neighborhood, they're dealing with survival
no,
issues.
and that no, that's where I'm going. Because to them, it's not so important to fix my street. It's more important to do this or this and this. And so that's what they're focusing on. And so things like fixing streets or better books in schools and things like that often take a back burner because I'm trying to survive and take care of my family. I don't have time to stand up for the entire neighborhood. But if everybody in the neighborhood feels that way, nobody's going to stand up for that neighborhood.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the struggles that my main character goes through, because his initial effort was to become, I'm going to become a mayor of the city of Chicago. That's my great ambition. I've got this great education, I've this and that. But then he's confronted with the actual problems of people in the situation that you just described. Now you have to make a decision. Do I look at it, look at life as something just for me, or am I going to be concerned about the rest of the group? Frantz Fanon and Wretched of the Earth and other books that have been written in the psychology of being Black in America says over and over again that the burden is on us. Those of us who are the most educated in the group, those of us who are the professionals in the group, that burden is on us. That person who is poor and has to look out for just their survival, that's what they're doing. They're doing the best they can. But those of us who've been able to step up in the world and know more, we should have the burden of taking care of and advocating on behalf of the rest of the group. And what I find myself doing is recognizing that we will elect people to office. We will put people in high places with millions of dollars, and we sit back and say, oh, that person is fantastic because they've got millions of dollars. Well, question, how much of that million goes to help poor Black people? How much of their time is spent going out and being visible in Black neighborhoods and saying to young people, you can do better by doing these other kinds of things? And I think that's where we have fallen down at. We are not that kind of people anymore. And you can go back in our history and you'll see that no matter what, a person became a millionaire, what they would do is become a member of the NAACP. What they would do is get involved with their church. What they would do is get out there and be visible in their community. Muhammad Ali, when he was big timing with the money and everything, and even when he fell down, he would walk the streets of Chicago, talking to young people, giving out money. That is the burden that we have. But so many of us are not taking on the burden. And that's like I said, that's one of the stresses that comes out in the book, is that you cannot just be looking out for your career, your money, but you have to be concerned about the rest of the people. And hopefully by doing that, everyone gets to the promised land.
Well, I hear you. I guess ideally that would be the case, but I don't know how realistic it is, just based on the times we live in. So, I mean,
Why do you
it's
feel?
good to be hopeful. It's good to be hopeful.
Why do you feel that way, that it's not realistic?
Because for one, a lot of people, they have their own personal families and extended families that they're taking care of. They have their own, they're taking care of their nephews or nieces, or they're taking care of aging parents, or aging aunts or uncles, or aging grandparents. So and there's only so many hours and so many resources a person has.
Well,
so that doesn't really lend itself to the kind of setup where they can go into the neighborhoods and do things. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it though. Because if you look back again, look at our Black history. Martin Luther King had a family. He had a
Yes.
church. He could have
Yes.
decided to hell with all this other stuff. I'm going to preach every Sunday, make my money, raise my family. Malcolm X had a family. He could have said, let me not get out here and get in trouble. Let me just collect money, raise my family. We all have those kinds of issues, but we have to make a decision. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to become a national leader running across the country, but if you belong to a church, what's the problem with you setting up a committee or a group that helps the people in your community? If you have children at school, what's the problem with you getting on the school board and being an advocate, not just for your children, but for all the children? There's nothing that it's in our heads that's stopping us at the moment. And that's why I said it's very important for us to have Black history. And even more important, as you said earlier, to have it 365 days in a year. But if you have Black history and yet you're not really taking the time to understand Black history, you're just mouthing, oh, Martin Luther King and giving his speech or something like that, then you're wasting your time. But if you get into it and you learn about our people and the struggles they had, you understand, we understand that everybody has had a struggle. They could have all quit, you know, and did nothing. But you could have escaped from slavery and been in the North and ran your own job. But instead, certain people came back, brought more people with them. That was the kind of commitment that we've had to the betterment of the African people in America. That's the commitment. Not is it, will I say everybody has that commitment? No, I'm not suggesting that to you at all. But I'm not going to let us off the hook by saying each of us couldn't do something, some part of that process. I think, and that's really
Well,
important, even if it's just writing.
yeah, a
Even if you
lot of
just
people are
write the
doing
truth.
things, but they're doing them quietly too. Not everybody's going to lead marches or whatever. And just for the sake of conversation, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X both, they didn't spend a lot of time at home with their family
Well, they spend enough time at home to have children.
to create children, but you can read. I've read the history on it. Neither one of them spent a lot of time at home with their children. So you can be a community leader and then end up neglecting your own family too.
No, no, no. Yes, that's not true. Don't be a community leader. Do not be a community leader. But if you have a degree in psychology, what stops you from taking the time out during a week to have a group of young people and talking to them and advising them as to how they can improve their lives? If you have a degree in education, what stops you from taking and setting up a group in your community to help young people to learn about things that they don't know that you can help them with and get them moving on the way? It's just all of our professions, whatever profession we might be in, there's something we can do to help in our community. It could be at the local level or it can be a larger level. Not everybody's going to commit themselves to doing things that.
You're absolutely right. Even if you do a little bit, you're helping the bigger cause. Some people may be able to do more than others, but we can all do something for the betterment of our community. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I am saying, and I'm also understanding that our community perspective, not everybody is on the same page. I understand that. You know, in fact, some people are working against us because they see it as if that it's in their best interest financially to work against us. And we have to also be willing to call them out when we notice and see this stuff happening, because it does make life difficult for those of us who are trying to help people when they see these other people doing things counter to that effort. And we have to call them out as well. So, whenever we come up with excuses for not acting like we know better to do, that's just an excuse. And we know better. We were taught better. All of us were taught by parents, grandparents, great grandparents better than most people are acting at this current moment. That's why those of us who have some years on us have to stand up now and say, we can do better than this. This is not us. Walking around, whatever
We
it
can
is.
agree on that.
Yeah,
We can
we
always
can
do
do better
better.
than this.
We can
And
always do better because the biggest room in the world is room for improvement.
yeah, I agree with you on that. But I'm talking about doing better based on our history. Our history says we've been able to do this at this level. And now we've dropped down. We can do better than where we're at in terms of dropping down. We did, we were able to get together to elect President Obama to be president. Why? Because we have been nurturing the idea of Black power long before the election day. But most people, when they voted, if you had told them this is an example of Black power, they probably would say, "Oh, I don't want to do that." But that's because their minds have been brainwashed. They didn't understand that back in the 60s, when you said Black power, part of it was that Black people want to be able to control their political destiny. And that's what we're doing. Every time we elect Black people to positions, every time they go anywhere, that is an example of us exercising our Black power. But the minds of young people and many middle-aged people today would not be able to understand that. So we just do it without telling them it's Black power because they wouldn't get it. But we have to do it. We have to make certain that that we make them collect the votes and do it. Just like right now, we have all this activity in courts because many of the white communities in the South and some in the North are gerrymandering their districts so that they can replace Black elected officials with white elected officials. It's an ongoing process. The struggle for power is an ongoing process. And we cannot be sitting back saying, oh, we're okay. We're not okay. Because as you said earlier, every time a group comes in, they would supplant us. Every time somebody comes along with a bigger, what is determined to be a bigger problem, they're going to be the ones that gets the fruits of the society. We cannot accept that. I will not accept it. And I think all of us who are educated African Americans should be out there saying, no, we're not going to accept this. Not just for my personal benefit, because I can possibly get a job and do well. But I want to be able to say, I pulled up somebody else with me as I would march along. Because I remember when young Black people went to restaurants and sat there and got spit on and got beaten on and did everything else. And if that resonates with me to the point where I can't sit back and say I can do nothing when I have my history that says, look what people did so I could be in this comfortable position that I'm in today. That's just not right. And so my job is to then communicate that to everyone else I meet, whether they want to hear it or not. I think that I have to communicate, and I do it.
Oh,
So,
I wish we could talk longer because this is a conversation that needs to be had. But unfortunately, we hit the end of the half hour.
yes.
So just very quickly, if you can again show us your book and remind us where we can find it.
When Shepherds Kill, you can get it online, Amazon, any of the other online booksellers. You can even get it at your local bookstore. It's everywhere. Thank you very much.
Well,
And thank you.
it's a hardcover, right? Is it available in
Hardcover.
paperback?
Yes, Amazon has it in paperback.
Okay. All right then.
All
Well,
right, then.
thank
You
you.
all have a
Thank
great
you.
evening. Enjoy the
Thank you
rest
so
of your
much for
holiday.
being a guest on the show. And thank you for engaging us in a great conversation.
All right, thank you. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.